In this tutorial, we'll learn how to create a non-destructive chromatic aberration effect in Krita using various techniques. This is a rather popular glitch-like effect used in illustration and photo editing that adds a colored fringe to the image. I've made a separate video explaining what is chromatic aberration and why it looks the way it does. If you're curious, be sure to check it out. Let's start by opening the photo that we want to edit in Krita. You can see here in the layers docker that we only have one layer for the photograph. If you're applying the effect to an illustration, then you'll probably have multiple layers. In that case, you should either create a new document and import the illustration as a file layer, or you can simply put all the layers inside a group so they are treated as a single layer by Krita. For this video, what we're going to do is add a new paint layer above the photograph and draw a white circle on it that we'll use later as a reference. Then we'll place both layers inside a group. This group is going to be the group that we'll apply the chromatic aberration effect to, instead of applying it directly to the photograph layer. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is select the layer that we want to apply our effect to, which is our group, and add a new clone layer for it. Next, we'll change the blend mode of the clone layer from normal to copy red, which is in the mist category. You can see here in the canvas that this doesn't seem to have done anything. That's because we're copying the red component of the pixels and pasting it in the exact same position we copied the red from, so the result is exactly the same pixel data that we started with. Let's select the Move tool in the toolbox and click and drag around the canvas to move the clone layer around. What we're doing is effectively taking the red component of the RGB color model and moving it around the canvas. Areas that used to be black before on the photo will become red since they gain the red color, while areas that used to be white before will become cyan since they lost the red color and now only have the blue and green colors. Depending on what sort of effect you want to achieve, this is all you need to do. We can move this all the way here, and that is going to look pretty cool. This is not how chromatic aberration looks in real life. This is much closer to an anaglyph 3D effect, except it doesn't work like a real anaglyph either, since in a real anaglyph you would need two photos of the same object taken at different angles, and here we only have one angle. But it looks cool, and that's all that really matters. Let's try making this more into a real chromatic aberration effect. To do this, we'll need another clone layer of our source. For this, we can simply select the clone that we already have and click on this button to duplicate it. Now we have two clone layers. Next, we're going to change the blend mode of this new clone layer from copy red to copy green, and this will allow us to move the green component to a different position as well. For a realistic chromatic aberration effect, we want the copy green layer to be closer to the original position of the photo than the copy red layer. It can be pretty hard to tell the exact position of each layer from their combined effects in the layer stack, so it's a good idea to use something that is pure white as a reference point. As you can see here, when the order is correct, we get red first, then yellow, then white, then cyan, then blue. They need to be aligned on a single axis in order for it to look right. If we wanted to, we could move the green across a perpendicular axis, and that would also look cool, but it's not how chromatic aberration works anymore. We can also make this look like a purple fringe instead of a yellow fringe by changing which channels are being copied. It doesn't feel very organized to have a single effect as two separate layers in our layer stack. Let's try organizing this by placing our chromatic aberration into a single group. You'll notice that doing this makes the effect stop working. We can fix this by clicking on this brick wall icon in the group in the layers docker, which enables the pass-through mode in the layer group. Now we can display and hide our chromatic aberration effect by displaying and hiding the group. One problem will occur if you try to apply this effect to a semi-transparent graphic. For example, let's say that we have here the logo of an AI-powered social media app called Beep Boop. It's very simple, just a black squircle with a white asterisk on top, and we want to add a chromatic aberration effect to this asterisk. Let's try to do it the way we already learned. First, we create a clone of the asterisk we want to apply the effect to. We change the blend mode from normal to copy red, and then we move it. Observe that while this does create a red area on one side, it doesn't seem to remove the red from the other side and turn it cyan like it used to. Why does this happen? The copy red blend mode only makes white cyan if we are copying from a color that doesn't have any red, such as pure black. In this case, the bottom right area of the original image of the asterisk isn't actually black, it's transparent. The black is in the squircle from the other layer. Let's see if we can fix this by placing these layers inside of a group. You can see here that hasn't fixed the problem at all. It actually made it worse because now copy red doesn't seem to do anything. How do we fix this then? First, we need to place both the asterisk and black background inside a single layer group. Now we're going to move the clone layer outside the group, and we're going to make it clone the group instead of cloning only the asterisk. We can do this by right-clicking on the clone layer and clicking on Set Copy From. A dialog will appear where we can select the group as the new source for the clone layer. Now we have the cyan that we wanted, but we also got some cyan that we didn't want. In this case, the solution will be to use a clipping mask. Fortunately, we can just use the squircle for this. Let's put both the clone layer and the group inside a layer group, and then we enable the Inherit Alpha setting on the clone layer to clip it to the squircle. Now it's clipped. We repeat this process for Copy Green, and then we'll have added a Chromatic Aberration effect to our logo. The Move Tool method is good enough in many cases, but it has a bit of a problem. If the edges of the image are pure white or very bright, it's going to be very obvious that we have displaced one RGB component because the edge will suddenly look like the opposite color. How can we get rid of this? In this case, first we're going to reset the position of the clone layer so it matches the source layer again. The easiest way to do this is to just delete the clone layer and make a new clone. But if for some reason you can't do that, simply change its blend mode to difference and try aligning it by pressing the arrow keys until the whole canvas becomes black. Then we can change the blend mode back to copy red. Now that we've returned the clone layer to its original position, we're going to add a transform mask to it. With the transform mask selected, we can use the transform tool to transform the clone layer however we want. Of course, if we only use the transform tool to move the cloned layer around, that isn't really much different from using the move tool. However, with the transform tool, we can scale the cloned layer so that it covers the entire canvas even after we move it around. With this method, we can make the chromatic aberration effect disappear in the center of the photo while becoming stronger near the edges. In Krita, the transform tool also has several other modes of operation that can be found in the tool options docker, some of which can be very useful for controlling how this effect looks, since it's also possible to use them with a transform mask. The next trick that we'll learn is how to make the chromatic aberration look more realistic. As you can see here, this effect is creating these sharp edges that don't look like the chromatic aberration phenomenon that you would see in a real photo. Since it looks cool, it's fine in most cases, especially in illustration, but there is a trick we can use to make it look more real. To do this, we're going to add a filter mask to our photo. The filter that we want is motion blur. We'll adjust the angle and length of the motion blur so that it matches the direction we moved our color towards. Depending on how much we've moved the components, this can be enough to make it look like a real chromatic aberration. Next, we'll learn how to create a chromatic aberration effect of any color. Right now, we're using blend modes to copy whole channels from the RGB color model. This means that we can dislocate red, green, or blue. By moving two channels together, it's also possible to dislocate the opposite colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow. This is probably enough for most people, but what if we wanted a hue that is between these colors, such as orange or pink? To achieve such effect, we'll need to use a different and more complex approach. Let's start by opening a photo in Krita again and recreating the copy red effect without using the blend mode. The first thing that we want to do is create a clone of the photo. Then we'll put the clone inside of a group. Next, we'll add a new fill layer. This will fill the entire canvas with a specific color. Since we're recreating the copy red effect, we'll make the color pure red, which means 255 red, 0 green, and 0 blue in an 8-bit per color channel document. Now we'll change the blend mode of the fill layer from normal to multiply, which is in the arithmetic category. As you can see in the canvas, this has effectively extracted the red channel from the photo. That's because the green and blue of all pixels were set to 0, and any number multiplied by 0 is 0, so the fill layer is removing the green and blue color of all the pixels. At the same time, the red component is kept intact because the color we chose for the fill layer had the maximum amount of red possible, or, in other words, 100% red. Any number multiplied by 100% is itself, so the amount of red doesn't change. Now that we have isolated the red channel, we want to move this somewhere else and somehow merge it back with the original image. How can we do this? The first thing that we need to do is remove this red from the original image before we move it. To do this, change the blend mode of the group from normal to subtract, which is in the arithmetic category. The subtract blend mode will literally subtract the pixel values of this group layer from the layer below. Keep in mind that the green and blue values for all pixels in this group are set to 0. When Krita blends the layers, what is going to happen is that for every pixel in the layer below, the value 0 is going to be subtracted from the green and blue components. Since any number minus 0 is itself, that means the green and blue values won't change at all. Only the red values are going to change. As you can see in the canvas, there is no red anymore. The image is made entirely from green and blue. Now that we have removed the red, the next thing that we want to do is add it back at a different position. To do this, we could repeat the previous steps to extract the red color again, but there is a quicker way. We can simply create a clone layer of this group. This will clone the red-only image without cloning the blend mode of the group. This means that we can use a different blend mode in the clone. The blend mode that we want this time is addition, which is in the arithmetic category. Observe that after we have subtracted the red values and added them back, we just got the exact same image that we started with. That means the math is working as it should. Now we can add a transform mask to this clone and move it using the transform tool. As you can see, this is behaving just like the copy red blend mode. Now that we've recreated the copy red blend mode, we can customize which color is being copied by changing the color of the fill layer that is multiplying the photo. To do this, right-click on the fill layer and click on Properties to display its dialog again. Let's make this color orange, for example. As you can see in the canvas, this does create an effect that we wouldn't be able to make using a simple blend mode. You don't need to keep the saturation at the maximum value if you don't want to. You can use darker or brighter colors if you want, and you can even use grayscale, although it isn't very useful. Black won't change the image at all. Gray will create a semi-transparent copy, and white is simply going to displace all pixel values to the new position. Let's dislocate a second color. We can do this by duplicating the first group, moving it to the top of the stack, and changing its color. Then cloning it, changing the blend mode to addition, and moving it around. We can do this more than 2 times if we wanted to. The final trick that we'll learn about is how to create a multicolored chromatic aberration effect. This probably isn't a thing that exists in the real world. To do this, first create the copy red effect like we did before. Then, place the fill layer inside a group, then change the blend mode of the fill layer from multiply back to normal, and change the blend mode of the group from normal to multiply. As you can see, this hasn't really done anything, and it just looks like the copy red effect again. Next, we're going to change the color of the fill layer from red to pure black. Since pure black is all zeros and this is multiplying the layer below, it's going to make it all zeros. Then we'd be subtracting all zeros and adding all zeros. Consequently, this is actually not doing anything to the original image at all. Finally, we're going to add a new paint layer on top of this black fill layer. And in this new paint layer, we can paint the colors that we want to display. For example, if we select the red color and paint here, it's going to create a copy red effect only in the area that we painted. Since we can paint with any color, that means we can also pick the green color instead and paint on the same layer. And it's going to work like copy green only in the area that I painted green. You aren't limited to paint layers, by the way. If you want to use a vector layer or a gradient, you can do it as well. This is how you create a chromatic aberration effect in Krita. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you again in the next video.